Hello, this is Derek Daniels with Bright Idea. This gentleman that I'm going to introduce you to today, his name is Zig Ziglar. He is considered one of the best motivational speakers to ever live. And in my opinion, I think he really was. This southern-born man with a southern accent had the wittiest, he had the wittiest mind. He had a great sense of humor, an absolutely phenomenal delivery, and his message is timeless. It will still go on and on and on. So, today I'm going to introduce you to Zig Ziglar and his message of hope. I hope you guys really enjoy Zig's message. And this is Derek Daniels with The Bright Idea.
In the first 77 seconds of this presentation, I will give you an idea which you will agree is absolutely significant. In the first 12 minutes, I will give you 4 concepts that if you will apply them will make a difference in your life. As I present them to you, you're going to be thinking to yourself, I like that, I'm going to remember it. But the reality is, when I finish this presentation, virtually none of you who are listening to this could give all 4 of them back to me. And that's the reason we will encourage you to listen over and over and over, because repetition is the mother of learning. That makes it the father of action. That means it's the architect of accomplishment. Now, let's start with this. How many of you have ever either heard me before or else this will be your first time? Could I see your hands, please? All right. Now, the second question is kind of tricky, so stay with me. How many of you honestly and sincerely believe, as a matter of fact, you're totally convinced beyond any doubt, there's something you can specifically do in the next 2 weeks that would make your personal life, your family life, and your business life all worse? May I see your hands in the live audience, okay? You probably know the next question then. How many of you believe there's something you can specifically do that will make all of them better? Okay? Now, as you listen to this on tape, I hope you're responding to me as well. How many of you believe that the choice is yours? Can I see your hands? How many of you believe that every choice has an end result? May I see your hand? How many of you believe making the right choices is your responsibility? All right. Now, in these seconds that we've been talking, and it's actually a little less than 77 seconds, here's what you have said, whether you realize it or not. You have just said that regardless of how good or bad my past has been, regardless of how good or bad my present is, there's something I can specifically do now that will make my future either better or worse, and the choice is mine. Now, folks, that's profound. I'll always tell you when I've said something profound. And the reason I do is I found out a few years ago that an incredibly high percentage of my audiences do not recognize my profound statements when I make them unless I tell them this is profound. Now, this is going to involve a lot of communications. We had a lady right here in Dallas went down to see her attorney about a divorce. And the lawyer said, "What's the problem?" And she started rambling. He said, "No," said, "be specific." And she said, "Like how?" And he said, "Well, do you have any grounds?" She said, "Oh, yes." Said, "As a matter of fact, we got about 40 acres right out here on the north end of town." He said, "No, that's not what I'm talking about." Said, "Do you have a grudge?" She said, "No, but we've got a really neat little carport there right on the side of the house." And he said, "Woman, we need to make this personal." She said, "Like how?" And he said, "Well, does that man ever beat you up?" She said, "Oh, no." Said, "I'm up every day at least an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours before he even turns over." And he said, "Well, do you accept any responsibility for the difficulty?" And she said, "Like how?" And he said, "Well, for example, do you ever wake up grouchy?" She said, "Oh, no." Said, "I just let him get up on his own, whenever he will." And he said, "Well, why do you want to divorce the man?" And she said, "Well, the guy just can't communicate." Now, we're going to try to make the communication such that as you listen to this tape, you will have no difficulty understanding exactly what I am talking about. Everything is choice. For example, for 24 years of my adult life, by choice, I weighed well over 200 pounds. Now, the reason I say by choice is simply because I have never accidentally eaten anything. Always a choice. Now, if I choose to eat too much, then I have chosen to weigh too much. You are where you are in many ways because of a series of choices that you have made. Now, I'm the 10th of 12 children. I asked my mom one time, I said, "Mom, why so many?" And she said, "Well, son, where do you think I should have stopped?" Well, it's for sure I didn't think after number 9. Now, you can absolutely count on that. Let me say something that I think is very important. A few minutes ago, you made the observation that the responsibility was yours to make the right choices. Now, responsibility carries a lot of weight in life. Barbara Tuchman, 2-time Pulitzer Prize winner, said the number one need we have in our society today are people who will accept responsibility. And that is so tremendously true. Most people that I speak to think I'm in my early 30s, but actually I'm 68. Now, what that means is I was raised during the Depression. My dad died when I was 5 years old. There were 6 of us too young to work. Small Mississippi town, Yazoo City. We don't even have a village drunk. We share with a little community, next to us. But it's exciting. About once a month a train comes through town. And I know that doesn't sound like excitement until I explain we don't have tracks there. And then that, that puts it in a different category. It really does. We used to hang a mirror at the end of Main Street, make the town look bigger. Well, anyhow, small Mississippi town. Now, let me say something here. I can tease about my hometown for one very good reason. It's an amazing little town. Former president of the American Medical Association is from Yazoo City. Former president of the American Bar Association from Yazoo City. Former president of the Southern Baptist Convention from Yazoo City. The former editor of Harper's Magazine is from Yazoo City. Former secretary of Agriculture is from Yazoo City. Chairman of the Republican Party is from Yazoo City. Jerry Clowers is from Yazoo City. Now, I have no idea what happened to the other 3. But, I can tease about my hometown because it has been so productive, and we're going to be using humor throughout because, you see, people learn faster, they learn more, and they remember longer. But the major point I'm making there is we can tease about that little town because of its productivity. People who are confident and productive, they don't mind you kidding them along. Good, clean kidding and humor, I think, very definitely has a place. Now, I don't need to tell you that as a 10th of 12 children, 6 of them being too young to work, heart of the Depression, small Mississippi town, we had a tough time financially in the Depression. Other families had it tough too. But I'm so grateful that for whatever reason, I did not choose to notice what we did not have. What I did notice is what a lot of people did have in that little town. See, even in those times, I noticed some people wore nice clothes. They drove nice cars. They lived in nice houses. They took nice trips. They even had dinner out. Some of them even played golf at the country club. You know what I've noticed in every decade of my life since, and this is the message I really want you to get right here. I've noticed that regardless of the economy, there are some people who don't pay any attention at all to it. As you well know, the media has accurately predicted 27 of the last 2 recessions. Now, there are some people who just don't pay any attention to what other people are doing. For example, I've noticed without exception that in some instances, many instances, when the economy is absolutely magnificent, there are a bunch of folks going broke. I have noticed that in some instances where the economy is absolutely horrible, there are a bunch of folks getting rich. How many of you have noticed exactly the same thing? Now, this is major point number 2. Major point number 1 is you do have a choice. You can do something now about your life, making it either better or worse, and the choice is here. Number 2 is this. It is not what is going on out there. You see, a lot of that you cannot change. There's nothing you can do about Bosnia at this moment personally. There is something you can do about you and your future, and that's what I want to be talking about. It's not what happens out there that makes a difference in your life. It's what goes on between your own two ears. Now, that's what makes the difference. Neil Rudenstein's the president of Harvard University, and this is point number 3. His mother is a part-time waitress. His father is a prison guard. See, it's not who your mama and your daddy might have been. It's not what they have done. The question is, what kind of legacy will you leave to your children and your grandchildren? It is what you do. Now, a lot of times we encounter people who have a pity party on a regular basis. They have what we call the plum disease, P-L-O-M. That's poor little old me. And the problem basically with pity parties when they have them is that very few people come, and those who do don't bring presents. Now, let me point out, they did a study of 300 world-class leaders. Now, I'm talking about Roosevelt and Churchill. I'm talking about Martin Luther King and Mahatma Gandhi. I'm talking about Clara Barton and Helen Keller and Mother Teresa, world-class leaders, 300 of them. 75% of them were either raised in poverty, or had been abused as children, or else had some serious physical impairment. But you see, point number 4, they understood it's not what happens to you, it's how you handle what happens to you that is going to make the difference. I think, for example, of the Edsel automobile, which many people recognize as being by far the most profitable motor car that Ford ever built. Now, I know what you listening to this tape are thinking right now. You're thinking to yourself, Ziglar, that sucker was a dog. Well, it cost them a whole lot of money. They stopped production. What do you mean it was the most profitable one? Remember I said a moment ago, it's not what happens to you, it's how you handle it. You see, out of the Edsel came the Mustang. Out of the Mustang came the Taurus. They took the mistake, learned from it, capitalized on it, and look at what happens as a result. It's not what happens to you, it's how you handle it. John Foppe was recognized 2 years ago as one of the top 10 young Americans by the United States Junior Chamber of Commerce. I met John when he was speaking for the Department of Defense up in Colorado Springs. He had admirals and generals, CEOs of the Fortune 500 companies in front of him, 19-year-old young man, and he spoke with confidence and clarity and conviction and power. John had graduated from college 3.5 years, cum laude, working his way partially through. You ought to see John drive a car and scramble eggs and go skiing and paint portraits and do those sort of things. You ought to watch him just eat. You see, John Foppe was born without any arms. But as John said to me one day, he said, Zig, if I had the longest, strongest arms ever put on a human being, he said, there'd still be only so high I could reach, only so much weight I could lift. I don't care how long and tall and strong and big your arms might be. They have a limit. But, Zig, I face more situation every day where I have to use my creative imagination than the average person does in a month's time. And there's no limit to what we can do internally. Now, this message basically is the power of hope. Because if there's hope in the future, there is literally power in the present. My objective in these recordings is basically to share with you how you can get more of the things that money will buy and all of the things that money won't buy. Money is important. There are some people, who literally are struggling for survival. Part of our objective is to help those people, and all of us, at least in one or two instances in our life, have been in that situation where if we had a flat tire, it was a financial disaster. If we spilled something on a dress or tore a suit or something, it really represented difficulty. We would run out of gas on the highway. These people are struggling for survival. We want to share with you as we go along how to move from survival to stability. And then how do you move from stability to success? And then how do you move from success to significance? Money's important. Now, don't misunderstand. It's not everything, but it rates reasonably close to oxygen. It's got to be in the picture. Now, you know, anybody that says they're not interested in money gonna lie about other things too. A lot of people just don't have any concepts about money. They talk about cold, hard cash, which is silly. It's neither cold nor hard. It's soft and warm. It feels good. Feel it. That's long enough. All right, now, the nice thing about money is it's so beautifully colored. I mean, listen, ladies, this will go with anything you've got. I mean, you don't have to worry about color coordination. Yeah, you know, I gotta confess, I like the things that money buys. I like to wear nice clothes. I like to drive a nice car. I like to live in a nice house. I like to take nice trips. I like to take my wife out to nice restaurants and all that. I like all of those things, and all of them cost money. But I love the things money won't buy. See, money bought me a nice house. It'll never buy me a home. Money will buy me a bed. Won't buy me a good night's sleep. Money will buy me a companion. Won't buy me a friend. Money will buy me a good time, but it won't buy peace of mind. All of those things are available. Now, I'll never tell you it's easy, but they are available. I want to share with you in this series, how do you achieve employment security in a world where job security no longer exists? And I think everybody would recognize that. And we're going to look at that very carefully. How do you live well? And how do you finish well? I think it's very important we understand that. How do you develop the qualities that are necessary to accomplish all of these things? And do I have what it takes? I'm going to be giving you an awful lot of stories, examples, and illustrations. The Center for Creative Research out of Greensboro, North Carolina, said that the parable, the story, the example, is the best way to teach, particularly if you are teaching values. Seems that a couple of thousand years ago, somebody else used the parable quite effectively in teaching the truths that really do make a difference. When I think of the thought that might go through your mind as you sit there in your car maybe listening to this, wondering, well, you know, Zig has said some pretty significant things there about, you know, what is available. I wonder, poor little me, plum disease in full force. Can I accomplish those things? Well, let me tell you about Vince Robert, and you kind of think along with me and see how you compare to Vince. He's 37 years old. Now, how old are you? Had a 5th grade education. How much education do you have? He drove a taxi. What do you do? Now, the question is, where do you think Vince Robert was going to end up in the minds of a lot of people? I know many would say, well, there's a perfect candidate for governmental assistance before he passes on. But one day when Vince was waiting on a fare at the airport or downtown in front of a hotel, lightning struck. I don't know what happened. But he bought a book. It was a dictionary, a 15-pound Webster's dictionary. Isn't it? How many of you know why Webster wrote the dictionary? His wife kept asking him, now, what does that mean? Well, anyhow, I'm sure glad y'all are in such a good frame of mind. You know, laughter is good for you. And gets those endorphins and the dopamine and norepinephrine hopping around in there, you know. And interestingly enough, it also is economical to laugh. There's new scientific evidence that's been validated in the American Medical Association journal, which proves beyond any doubt that if you have a tendency to laugh and refrain from doing it, the laughter reverses itself, comes back inside, and spreads your hips. So so we encourage you, go ahead and really laugh and enjoy yourself, because, as you well know, obesity is widespread. Now, Vince Robert put that dictionary on the front seat of his automobile. And starting on word 1, page 1, he started learning those words. By the time he had barely gotten into the dictionary, maybe an eighth of an inch thick, all of a sudden he starts understanding things he's only been hearing. Understanding things he's only been reading. Now, this is validated by Georgetown Medical School, which said in their studies that in 100% of the cases, no exception, that when your vocabulary increases, your IQ goes up. Every single case. You can build a magnificent vocabulary and not invest any time at all. None. All you got to do is get your dictionary, put it in the bathroom. Now, when you analyze what I just said, it really will take you no time at all. That IQ goes up. Now, let me tell you what happened to Vince Robert. As he started hearing things and listening to things, he started understanding them. He started investing in the stock market, took every dime he could spare. He ended up buying the 19-car cab company. He kept investing. Today he's a wealthy man, travels Canada, telling people how he did it. You know what I believe with all my heart? There'll be tens of thousands of Vince Robertses who will listen to what I just said and say, if that guy can do it, I can do it too. That's what this is all about. I want to share with you a basic concept which you will hear me repeat over and over. Namely, that failure is an event. It's not a person. Yesterday really did end last night. Today really is a brand new day. And it gives us another choice today to do with it whatever it is that we wish to do. One of the things that I'm going to be covering in this series is how do you get along with other people? How do you get along with that bloodsucker of a boss who wants to squeeze every ounce of blood out of you and only pays you minimum wage because it's the law? How do you get along with that lazy, irresponsible employee who wants all the benefits and do none of the work, who thinks they ought to show up when they want to, where they want to, how they want to, and do what they want to? How do you get along with that person? How do you get along with that man I'm married to that no human being alive could ever tolerate? How do you get along with that woman? I don't know how anybody can. How do you handle that irresponsible, lazy teenager? How do you get along with all of these people? Well, we're going to look at how you do all of those things. How many of you would agree in this live audience that that's going to be extremely valuable information to you? Because you know some people like I have just described, okay? Let me tell you, how do you handle a job you hate? Now, I know you love your job as you listen to this, but there are a lot of people who have jobs that they're just not very excited about. They kind of hate them. I was going through the airport out at DFW, through the security bit, and this young man was there, and I always said, "Thank you very much. How you doing?" He said, "Just awful. I hate this job." And I smiled at him and I said, "Well, that's interesting. I'm certain that there are literally thousands of people in Dallas, Texas alone who would love to have this job that you absolutely hate." The young man did a quick double take and he said, "I never thought about that." I said, "Well, don't you really think you ought to think about it just for a moment? How do you learn to love a job that you hate? And if you can't learn to love it, how do you get to be productive?" Let me tell you a story. It's about a guy named Richard Oates. Now, Richard Oates was a superintendent with one of the nation's largest home builders. For 5 years, he worked with them. Last 3 years, he was under such intense pressure that he told me less than a week ago, he said, "I hated Sundays." And I said, "Well, why on earth did you hate Sundays?" He said, "Because Sunday was the last day before I would have to get back in the rat race." And he said, "I was under so much pressure, I was stressed out to an incredible degree." Well, let me tell you the rest of that story. In the 5 years he was there, he only missed 4 days because of illness. In the last 3 years he was there, he was never late a single time, regardless of the weather, regardless of how he felt, regardless of what the car trouble was. He always did not use the complete vacation time. The last year he was there, he was recognized as one of their top superintendents, would undoubtedly have gotten the award as being the best. But he had, in the meantime, accepted a better position, and they just generally don't give those awards to people when they have left the company they're with. Perhaps the most amazing thing, though, is that the thing that was so amazing to me, although he had 400 home units that he was in charge of, 15 to 20 homes going up at all times, in the last 10 months, he built and closed 83 homes without missing a single move-in date. Now, that is absolutely unbelievable. I asked him, I said, "Well, how'd you do it?" He said, "Well, first of all, there's a question of survival. I do have responsibilities. I just love to eat. I have responsibility to my wife. I have other responsibilities. I had a responsibility to my company. I'm known as a company man. My responsibility was to give them the very best that I had, regardless of how I might be feeling at the moment. Now, folks, that's what we call character. Character is the ability to carry out a good resolution long after the excitement of the moment has passed. That is accepting responsibility. He said not only that, but he said, I had a mentor, Stan Sermonak, who had really taken me under his wing, had made it possible for me to get this particular job, had been my mentor and encourager. I did not want to let him down. Now, what is all of that saying, folks? There are some absolutes in life. You know, we talk about relative this and relative that. Well, you know, relative as far as I'm concerned are brothers and sisters and in-laws and that sort of thing. But there are values that are not relative. For example, suppose we were to take the laws and say, well, we got about 2,000 on the book. I believe in, let's see, this one, that. But I don't like that one at all. I'm going to take that one out of there. We would be in chaos, would we not? It would be anarchy. Now, the thing I guess I like best of all about Richard Oates, and I recognize that this is going to sound a little self-serving, he just happens to have married one of the most beautiful girls I've ever seen in my life, my daughter. Now, that means very simply that he's my son-in-law, but the story is that today he's our vice president in charge of marketing and product development, applying the same energy, the same commitment. You see, he took a job he did not like, gave it his absolute best, learned the skills, the commitment, the responsibility to move into a better job. Don't like your job? Give it your best shot. That's the way you get the better job. Let me give you the second illustration. Several years ago, my executive assistant, Laurie Majors, received a telephone call from a lady in Birmingham, Alabama. Now, Laurie is quite a story. She's been with me 18 years. She finished the 10th grade. 2 years ago, we evaluated our key employees. Laurie graded out at slightly above the master's degree level. Let me tell you something. You can finish school. You can even make it easy. You never finish your education. And it is seldom easy. She simply keeps on learning, keeps on growing. And you, by virtue of the fact that you have invested in this set of tapes, taken your money, now taken your time, means that you're investing in yourself, in your future, and I commend you for that. Laurie got this phone call from this lady in Birmingham, Alabama. After the phone call, she said to me, you know, Zig, the lady thinks she's got an incredible problem. I think that you could probably solve it in 5 minutes if you can meet with her when you get to Birmingham. I said, well, Laurie, I'll get there early, invite the lady to come backstage, we'll have a little chat. When the lady came backstage, and incidentally, I don't do counseling. I'm not trained for it. I don't have the time for it. My natural inclination is to believe everything the last person I talk to tells me, and that doesn't make really for professional counseling, you know. But if somebody says, I got a problem, if I got 5 minutes, I'll give it my best shot, that's all I can do. Well, when the lady spotted me, she came walking across the stage, and I have never seen such anger in my life. I mean, the stage was rattling. Now, I'm not going to say she was overweight, but she's about 5.5 inches too short. When she saw me, she almost literally started crying. Oh, I'm so glad to see you. I got this terrible job. I just hate it. I want out of it. Can you help me? She's the kind of lady that could brighten up a whole room by leaving it, if you know what I mean. Now, in my own mind, I could well imagine this lady thinking that I was going to verbally put my arm around her and say, yes, my dear, life is tough, but you got to hang in there, and by and by things will work out okay. I could have done that, but if I had, I would have betrayed everything in which I believe. If somebody says help, I believe I'm supposed to help. Now, as I said, I don't do any counseling, but I'm so fortunate I have access to some of the really outstanding minds in this country. I check things out psychologically, physiologically, and theologically before I record it, write it, or verbalize it, and have strong endorsements from all three disciplines. There's one thing I do know about counseling, and that is that most people who come to you with a problem do not want a solution to the problem. What they want to do is they want to tell you about it, 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 you about it. And if you foul up the deal and solve the problem, then they can't tell you again, you again, you again, and you again. They want to talk about the problem. They do not want to solve the problem. I had very few minutes. I knew I had to get her attention, so I said, yes, and you know, ma'am, the sad thing is, I believe your situation is about to get a whole lot worse. Had I hit her in the face with a bucket of ice water, I could not have stunned her more. She said, what do you mean? I said, I believe that your company is going to fire you. Fire me? Why on earth would they fire me? You know, isn't it the truth that people who are the problem never recognize they are the problem? They're in complete denial. They think denial is just a river in Egypt. I mean, they are, you know, they're just not with it. You know, no snowflake ever blames itself for the blizzard. No raindrop ever blames itself for the flood, but each plays a part. Every person in life either builds or tears down. Why would they fire me? I said, ma'am, I don't believe there's a company in America big enough to sustain this much poison in one small spot. And all of a sudden, the job she hated everything about, all of a sudden takes on a little different hue and value. She said, well, what am I going to do? I said, do you really want to know? She said, yeah, that's the reason I came to you for help, but you sure haven't been much help so far. And I said, well, ma'am, I got an idea. I believe it'll work. And if you will do it, I know it will work. She said, well, tell me about it. I said, when you get home tonight, I want you to get a sheet of paper out. And I want you to make a list of all of the things you do like about your company and the people down there. She interrupted me. She said, that'll be easy. I don't like nothing about that company. Don't like nothing about those people down there. And I said, well, let me ask you a question. Do they pay you for working there? Well, she said, of course they pay me for working there. I said, you don't like to be paid for working. Well, she said, I certainly do. I said, then you like to be paid. She said, of course. I said, well, that's one thing you like about your job. She said, why, certainly. I said, a minute ago you said that there wasn't nothing you liked about the job. Well, I didn't know you was talking about that. I said, well, don't you think money's important? She said, yeah. I said, okay, let me ask you the second question. Do they pay you above average, below average, or about average for what you do? Well, she said, I got to confess, they pay me above average. I said, and don't you like to be paid above average? Well, she said, certainly I do. I said, I'll tell you what I want you to do. I want you to get that sheet of paper out right now. We're going to make a list of all of the things that you do like about your job. Well, she just sat there. I said, no, go ahead, get paper out. We'll make a list right now. She just sat there. I said, ma'am, let me tell you what my experience in life has been. People that won't take step one never take step two. Now, if you're unwilling to get involved in solving your own problem, we might as well terminate the interview. See, I can't solve your problem as you listen to this. I can give you some ideas, some information that will put you in better position to solve it. But I cannot solve your problem, nor can anyone else. We can give you ideas and information, but ultimately the solution has got to be there. She didn't want any part of having to solve her own problem, so that's the reason I did that. I said, you got your notebook in your hand, open it up, and let's take some notes. With anger, she opened the book. She said, now what'd you say the first thing I liked about my job was? I said, they pay you for working there. Write it down. I like my job. By the time we got through, this was about 15 years ago, by the time we got through, there were 22 things she liked about her job. She had 3 weeks vacation with pay. She had hospitalization insurance, health insurance. She was on a profit-sharing plan, had a great retirement plan. She was on a bonus program. She was in on executive decisions. She lived less than 15 minutes from her office, had her own private 22 things. I said, now, ma'am, when you get home tonight, I want you to get this list out. I want you to change it from I like my job because to I love my job. I want you to get in front of the mirror and I want you to look yourself right in the eye and say, I love my job, and do it with enthusiasm. I said, you'll sleep better tonight. When you get up tomorrow morning, get back in front of the mirror before you go to work and look yourself right in the eye and say exactly the same thing and take the list with you. Because in 24 hours, you will have moved from being a fault finder to a good finder. You know, a lot of people look for fault, try to find fault like there's a reward for it. I said, you will begin to look for something good, and you'll be amazed at how much that list is going to grow. Do this every morning, every night for the next 30 days. 6 weeks later, I was back over there conducting a sales seminar. And in the meantime, she had gotten our set of tapes, and she had learned that everybody's in sales. See, the sales department is not our whole company, but our whole company is our sales department. Everybody's in sales. And so when I got there for the sales seminar, there she sat right on the front row, grinning so wide she could have eaten a banana sideways. I mean, she was really excited. And I said, well, how you doing? She grinned even more broadly, and she said, I'm doing wonderfully well, Mr. Ziglar. You cannot believe how much those people down there have changed. So basically, how do you change all those people I'm talking about? You don't. You change you. And when you change you, that's when your world begins to change. See, God said to build a better world, and I said, how? It's such a cold and lonely place, and I'm so small and useless, there's nothing I can do. But God, in all His wisdom, said, just build a better you. That's what this is about, building a better you. Because you see, you got to be before you can do. You got to do before you can have. You got such a wide range of choices, and we're filled with them. Read a story of some twins, two twins. One of them was an alcoholic. One of them was enormously successful. Their father was an alcoholic. In separate interviews, they asked the alcoholic twin, how did it happen that you became an alcoholic? He said, I had no choice. You see, my father was an alcoholic. They asked a very successful young man, how'd you do it? He said, I had no choice. You see, my father was an alcoholic. I didn't want to be like him. The choice, you see, is ours. And we go through life with that. Now, as you can tell, as I said earlier, I do tell a lot of stories. I'm going to share a lot of philosophy with you. Philosophy simply means the love of wisdom. One of the things that you will hear me say over and over is that you can have everything in life you want if you'll just help enough other people get what they want. I'll be quoting an awful lot of people. I'll be quoting Fred Smith. I'll be quoting John Maxwell, John Johnson, Mary Kay, Mary Crowley, Solomon, Lincoln, Confucius, Emerson, St. Augustine, Christ, Helen Keller, Mother Teresa, Dr. Forrest Tunnett, Rabbi Daniel Lapin, Martin Luther King, George Washington Carver. I'll be quoting Mahatma Gandhi and many, many others. I try to give credit when somebody gives me information. I do that for 3 reasons. Number 1, it is the right thing to do. Number 2, it indicates I've done my research. Number 3, if it's wrong, I can always say, that fella ought to have known better than that, okay? Now, let me say to you without any fear of error that you were born to win. But in order to be the winner that you were born to be, you got to plan to win, you got to prepare to win, and then and only then can you legitimately expect to win. Let me also tell you something else. Most of you in this live audience honestly and sincerely believe that my overhead is fairly well fouled up. Now, am I right on that, please, all right? Let me point out that really it is not fouled up. It is simply a little out of focus. Does that make it better? You see, focus makes a lot of difference. Focus simply means that you're in the same place physically and emotionally. Dr. Lewis Terman in 1920 at Stanford University started a study on 1,440 gifted youngsters. When he retired, another professor was assigned to them. They followed them to the end of their life. Many of them were extremely successful, brilliant young men and women. Many of them had gone on to great success. Not a single one attributed their IQ to their success. What they attributed to their success was their ability to focus on the issue at hand. You see, a lot of people, when they're working on the job, they're thinking about other things. They're thinking about the family. When they're with the family, they're thinking about the job. And they're not doing either job very effectively. You really need to be able to focus on what's going on. Now, let me simply say this. You were born to win, but you got to plan, you got to prepare, and you got to expect to win. Bobby Knight, who's won 3 national championships at basketball at Indiana University, says that the will to win is nothing without the will to prepare to win. In the National Football League, and I'm not a football expert, authority, the only thing I know about football, and know that I know, is that when the official calls a foul on the Cowboys, he is wrong. That's the only thing I really know about the game. But I do know one other thing about it, and that is this. In the last 2 minutes of the half, and in the last 2 minutes of the game, they score 20% of all of the points that are scored during the entire 60 minutes. In 4 minutes, they score 20% of all of the points in the entire 60 minutes. And the reason they do is they have the 2-minute offense. Into the first half, into the second half is when they do the score. And they plan to score. They prepare to score, and consequently they expect to score. Then incredibly enough, the defense cooperates with them to help them score. Now I know, as you sit there in your car or whatever you're doing, listen to this, you're thinking, now Ziglar, that's crazy, man. Why, the defense all week long, they practice that defense. They have what they call the prevent defense. They take the linebackers out, they send in their nickel backs, they put in their 2 best pass rushers, they get in a bend but don't break mode. They call it the prevent defense. Well, let me ask you a question. If they score 3 times as fast against the prevent defense as they do the regular defense, is it prevent or permit? What do you think? Now, let me kind of get us together and think, because you see, a few thousand years ago, a fellow named Job said something that's profound. He said, that which I feared greatly has come to pass. They're afraid they're going to score, and that fear comes to pass. Now, psychologists will tell you in a New York minute, and for your information, that's 32 seconds. They will tell you in a New York minute that you move to the strongest impression in your mind. And if you're afraid they're going to score on you, then the chances go up that, yes, they will score on you. Did you know that if an arresting police officer keeps the light flashing when he pulls a motorist aside, that the odds are 7 times as great that he will be run into by a passing motorist? That's right. They call it the moth attraction. The field goal kicker who says, oh, I'll miss it, we'll lose the game, is much more likely to miss it than is the one who says, I'll split the uprights, we'll win the game. The worst possible thing a parent can say to a child who wants to help with the dishes is, okay, but be careful. This is our best china. Don't break it. If they'd sat up all night praying, Lord, what can I tell this kid to help him break the dishes? They couldn't have done a better job in doing it. The sales manager who sends a salesperson out and said, now this is our #1 account. Don't foul it up. Couldn't have given them worse instruction. I'm sending you out because I have complete confidence that you're the one person I can depend on to handle this in the very best possible way. Let me give you a specific example. How many of you remember the tragedy that took place in San Francisco in 1982 when the San Francisco 49ers beat the Dallas Cowboys in the FC Championship game? Now, I know a lot of you folks listening to this not going to think it was a tragedy, but believe me, it was. You remember what happened. Dallas had just gone ahead. They'd scored a touchdown. Now they kick off. 2 minutes to play. Montana leads the 49ers all the way down the field. We've got our prevent defense in there. And you know what the play was? He sends Dwight Clark into the end zone. He throws him the pass. Clark doesn't realize he's trying to throw the ball out of the stadium. He jumps 28 feet. Straight up in the air, makes the catch. The 49ers win the game. Now, when the Cowboys got back the next day, Tex Schramm, who was the president of the Cowboys at that time, was being interviewed by the media. And they asked him, Tex, what happened? And he gave us a lesson in life with his answer. He said the Dallas Cowboys went out there determined not to lose the game. The San Francisco 49ers went out there determined to win the game. See, in this series, I want you thinking, how do I win the game? What I know about football, I'm not a football coach, but I am a verbal coach. I wouldn't send nickelbacks out there to defend for my team. How much value, if somebody said, I'm going to send my nickel employee out to help you. I mean, I got other service person, Hey, would that really turn to light your fire? Or would you think, boy, I'll be at least a dime. Well, anyhow, what I would do is I would send the Bruise Brothers out there. I would send the takeover guys. I would send the control team out there. I would send the intimidators out there. I would send somebody out determined not only to keep them from scoring, but to take that ball away and us score ourselves. Yes, I believe that you were designed for accomplishment. I believe you're engineered for success. I believe you're endowed with the seeds of greatness. You were born to win. But you got to have a plan if you are going to win. Now, what is winning? Well, the reality is that all of us want basically the same thing. And I'll be talking about this a whole lot. Everybody wants to be happy. I've never yet met anybody who said, no, I want to be miserable. Everybody wants to be healthy. Everybody wants to be at least reasonably prosperous. And I know many of you want to be unreasonably prosperous. That's okay. I've had money and I haven't had it, and I'm here to tell you, it's better to have it, folks. There's just, no question about it. Now, a lot of times, some of my Bible-reading friends will misquote the Bible and say, well, now, Zig, the Bible says that money is the root of all evil, and obviously it doesn't. He said the love of money is the root of all evil. Christ himself, 2/3 of the parables he taught, had to do with our physical and financial well-being. 2/3 of the success stories there had to do with that subject. There's a lot more talk about success in the Bible than there is heaven. Good Samaritan never could have put that old boy up at the inn after he'd been mugged if he hadn't had some money to do it with. Now, all of that said, yes, everybody, is interested in money. Everybody wants to be secure. They want to have friends, peace of mind. They want to have good family relationships, and they want to have hope that the future is going to be even better. Now, I'd like for you to kind of go with me on this. What part does hope play in all of this? I believe it's the basis of everything. You see, John Maxwell says if there's hope in the future, there's power in the present. Answer these questions as you listen to this tape. How happy can you be if you had no hope? How healthy would you be if you had no hope? How prosperous could you be if you had no hope? How secure are you with no hope? How many friends would you be able to accumulate if you're the kind of person who's just always moping and groping and griping and complaining, How much peace of mind is there, and how would your family relationships be? I think hope is the key to an awful lot of things. Let me emphasize a point. I will never tell you that acquiring these things is going to be easy. I know that life is tough. But I also know that when you're tough on yourself, that life can be tremendously rewarding to you. When you discipline yourself to do the things you need to do, when you need to do them, the day's going to come you can do the things you want to do when you want to do them. But my friends, the road to the top goes through lots of valleys. You do not develop champions on a feather bed. There's got to be those trials and difficulties in order for you to develop the muscles and the qualities that's going to make such a difference in your life. Some of the things I will be saying over and over is you do have to be before you can do. You got to do before you can have. Some years ago, I was coming in on a plane, which is generally the way I fly. And I was seated next to an old boy. Couldn't help but notice he had his wedding band on the index finger of his left hand. A little unusual. I commented on it. I said, friend, you got your wedding band on the wrong finger. And he said, yeah, I married the wrong woman. Well, I don't know if he married the wrong woman or not. I'm delighted to be able to say I did not marry the wrong woman. Last November, the redhead and I. Now, when I talk about my wife, at her suggestion, I always call her the redhead. When I'm talking to her, it's Sugar Baby. Her name is Jean. And incidentally, she's been inducted into the MasterCard Hall of Fame. And she is so excited. She made the all-mall team at Prestonwood Shopping Center 8 years in a row. And last year, she was MVP, Most Valuable Purchaser. Now, incidentally, her name is Jean. A lot of times when I'm talking to her, I always call her Sugar Baby. A lot of times people say to me, does your wife know you say all of those things about her? I said, Chuck, she helps me write the material. Now, let me point something out. She never gets offended. If she did, I would not say it. But the reason she doesn't get offended is she knows my heart. You see, we'd been married over 27 years before I was ever able to give her even financial stability, much less financial security. And yet during all of those years, not once do I ever remember her saying, honey, if we just had more money, here's what we could do. Or if we had more financial stability, here's what we could do. See, there was one 5-year stretch when I was in 17 different deals, and that's all they were, just deals. But during all those years, she would always say, honey, tomorrow's going to be better. You can do it. Then the two things that meant the most to me, I love you and I believe in you. I cannot begin to tell you what it meant to me to have a cheerleader cheering for me every day of my life and praying for me every night of my life. I can tell you without any reservation, no fear of error, that had it not been for her, I would not be talking to you on this recording right now. That encouragement and support meant it all. She knows, and I know about her. First of all, half the money is hers. The only time she goes berserk is when she's shopping for the grandchildren. And had we known grandchildren were going to be so much fun, we certainly would have been nicer to their parents. But anyhow, she knows that I delight in seeing her go shopping because she's very responsible. And it's a delight to be able to have her do that because for so long she could not. No, she does not get the least bit upset about the fact that I tease about that. Last November, as I said, we celebrated our 50th wedding anniversary. Now, we've been married 48 years. But we had heard so much about the 50th, we just decided to, go ahead and celebrate early. And I'm here to tell you that that really is some more celebration. Folks, one of the reasons I believe I'm qualified to make suggestions and make a difference in your life is, you see, I walked in your shoes. Today I was reminiscing in my own mind and thinking about something. The redhead brought 3 $20 bills downstairs that I had inadvertently left upstairs. And it reminded me when I was a young salesman in Lancaster, South Carolina, when we're having such a struggle. I've had my lights turned off. I've had my telephone disconnected. I had to turn a car back in that I didn't want to turn back in. My first baby was born, the hospital bill was $64. I didn't have $64. I had to get out and make 2 sales in order to get my own baby out of the hospital. And I so vividly remember one day as I was struggling with how do I eat and how do we put gasoline in the car to go make the sales calls. And I was kind of going through some of my drawers there at home, and there was 2 $20 bills and a $10 bill. It looked like all the money in the world. I've been confused many times in my life. I didn't know what I'd be doing tomorrow, much less next week, next month, or 5 years down the path. I don't believe there's anybody who will ever listen to this recording who has ever been as despondent on occasion in those early years and is puzzled and is curious. What do I do? Why can't I make things happen? I've been down that route. And yes, I've hurt as much as anybody here, I believe. On May 13th of 1995, my oldest daughter went home to be with the Lord. I know what it is to feel pain. I've felt your feelings. I've walked in your shoes. I know what does work. I know what does not work. And that's the reason I believe hope is such an important ingredient. John Maxwell put it well, if there's hope in the future, there's power in the present. John Johnson put it this way. It's not the color of your skin. It's not the place of your birth. It's the size of your hope that's going to determine where you're going to go in your life. John Johnson was born in a shotgun house with a tin roof in Arkansas City, Arkansas. For those of you who don't know what a shotgun house is, let me simply tell you, it's a house with a roof on it, and you're so named because you could point a shotgun and fire it through that house and wouldn't hit anything at all because it's just a shell. Today, John lives next door to Bob Hope part of the time. He lives in a high-rise on the Gold Coast overlooking Lake Michigan the rest of the time. He's been a guest in the White House with every president since Eisenhower. One of the 400 wealthiest people in America. Owns his own insurance company, own cosmetic company, Ebony magazine. And when he says, it's not the place of your birth or the color of your skin, it's the size of the hope, I take him very seriously because I do believe he knows what he is talking about. How do you get all of the things? What's involved? If an individual really wants to be happy and healthy and prosperous and secure and have friends, peace of mind, good family relationships and hope, let me tell you that you got to deal with all facets of life. And that's what we'll be doing in this series. You got to deal with your personal life, your family life, and your career. You cannot separate them. The January 8th, 1990 issue of USA Today said the number one cause of a productivity decline in America today is marital difficulty at home. You can't have a knockdown, drag out at home and go to the job and be as productive as you otherwise would be. You cannot get fired or chewed out by the boss on the job and go home with the same attitude as you'd have if you had just been given a significant raise or recognition. You cannot separate all of these things. I will attempt throughout this series to make one thing crystal clear, and that's this. If you go for quality of life first, invariably standard of living goes up. But if you just go for standard of living, there's no assurance that quality of life is going to go up. We will deal with all three of these. The principle we're going to be teaching through this series are the principle that made our country great. Did you ever wonder why it is that in 1776, 3 million Americans produced Washington and Hamilton and Jefferson and Madison and Monroe and Franklin and Washington and the whole bit? And why it is in 1995, 265 million Americans produced? I'll let you fill in the blanks as you sit there listening to this. I don't believe you can name one person with the stature of the individuals I have just named. Let me ask you, could it be what they were taught? As you reflect on it, do you believe that what you teach has anything to do with what you believe? And what you believe has anything to do with what you do? And what you do has anything to do with what you have? Well, let me tell you what they were taught. According to the Thomas Jefferson Research Institute, in the 1770s, over 90% of all of the educational thrust was of a moral, ethical, faith basis. Solid foundation stuff. That's the reason we produced all of the people we did in that period of our history. So many times people think, well, I'm just and then they say an accountant or a bookkeeper or a salesperson or a household executive or a doctor or a lawyer or whatever. What can I do? Let me read something to you which I think has genuine significance. Now, I proceed by saying, again, yes, you were designed for accomplishment. You're engineered for success. You're endowed with the seeds of greatness. You're fearfully and wonderfully made. You literally were born to win, but it takes a plan. As I conclude this first recording, I'm going to do so with a story. When I was writing my book, Over the Top, and if you did not get your book with a set of tapes, if you do not have a copy of it, I encourage you to pick up a copy of Over the Top. Now, much of the information is in these tapes. But you see, when you listen to something, that appeals to you emotionally. When you read it, that appeals to you logically. If you read it and hear it, then you're far more inclined to take action on it. So I encourage you to pick up a copy. I'd finished the book. My daughter, who happens to be in our live audience this evening, was the editor. And we had more fun writing that book together. She's the best editor by far I have ever had. We completed the manuscript. We sent it to the publisher, and he promptly packed it up and sent it back and said, how can you tell people how to go over the top when you haven't identified what the top is? I thought to myself, well, that's be a snap. I worked for 2 solid months. I would write and, no, that's not it. I'd write some more. No, that's not it. I'd try again. I'd get out and take those long walks and nothing was happening. I mean, I didn't have a clue. Then one day the redhead and I were in Shreveport, Louisiana. We were there visiting her sister who's in a nursing home. She has MS. Many of the people in that home are beyond human help. When we walk in there, I'm a solution-oriented guy. Somebody says, here's a problem. I say, step number 1 is this, step number 2 is this, step number 3 is that. Some of those people, unfortunately, are beyond that human help I spoke of. The redhead is not burdened with the belief that she's got to solve people's problems. She just walks in and grabs them and starts hugging and starts telling them how pretty they are, how much she loves them, how glad she is to see them. And they gather around her like bees at a hive. They really are there. And on that particular day, I watched it, and I couldn't handle it. I walked out. As I walked out, I was praying. I said, Lord, give me that kind of heart. Make me have that kind of compassion for my fellow human being. Touch me so that I will have that kind of spirit. In a few minutes, I felt better. I walked back in. They were in the big meeting room. My wife and her sister were seated at the table. I walked in and sat down, and all of a sudden, it started to come. The only piece of paper I had was the back of the motel bill, which I had just paid. I took the sheet of paper out, the bill out, and I started writing. 90% of what this is what I wrote in a few minutes that I'd struggled with for 2 months. You're at the top when you clearly understand that failure is an event, not a person. That yesterday ended last night, and today is your brand new day. You've made friends with your past, are focused on the present, and optimistic about the future. You're at the top when you know that success, a win, doesn't make you, and failure, a loss, doesn't break you. When you're filled with faith, hope, and love, and live without anger, greed, guilt, envy, or thoughts of revenge. You're at the top when you're mature enough to delay gratification and shift your focus from your rights to your responsibilities. You're at the top when you know that failure to stand for what is morally right is the prelude to being the victim of what is criminally wrong. You're at the top when you're secure in who you are, so you are at peace with God and in fellowship with man. You're at the top when you've made friends of your adversaries and have gained the love and respect of those who know you best. When you understand that others can give you pleasure, but genuine happiness comes when you do things for others. You're at the top when you're pleasant to the grouch, courteous to the rude, and generous to the needy. You're at the top when you love the unlovable, give hope to the hopeless, friendship to the friendless, and encouragement to the discouraged. You're at the top when you can look back in forgiveness, forward in hope, down in compassion, and up with gratitude. You're at the top when you know that he who would be the greatest among you must become the servant of all. You're at the top when you recognize, confess, develop, and use your God-given physical, mental, and spiritual abilities to the glory of God and for the benefit of mankind. You're at the top when you stand in front of the Creator of the universe and he says to you, well done, thou good and faithful servant. After I identified the top, I realized what I'd really done. I'd identified the bottom. That's the base. That's the foundation upon which you can build any kind of career, whether it's in education, athletics, business, medicine, law, accounting, computers, or whatever. I believe these are principles that will make a difference.